Hello, dear perceptive souls. This is Bevan. And I'm not doing a reading today. I am coming to you to just open up and make some commentary about all the things that are going on in the world right now. And some of the realizations, just sharing some of what I've learned about myself and some of the commitment that I'm making to be an ally to the Black people in my life and in the United States, across the world, and people of color and people of Indigenous heritage, anyone who has been oppressed and subjugated, making this commitment to continuing to learn how to support and be a voice in what is one of the most important and crucial struggles that we have ever faced as a global humanity. Because right now we stand at this crossroads. And we have a choice. We can either decide that every human life is precious, valuable, or we continue down the path that we've been on, where we make others less than. And we use people for our own benefit. And quite frankly, if you have participated in any kind of the global economy, your local economy in your country, you have participated in systemic racism. I have participated in systemic racism. Some of the clothing that I've bought. Why do you think things are so cheap at the store? Because someone barely has enough to eat somewhere else, right? And I taught a class this morning for over 100 empathic, beautiful souls. And someone said, when I scroll down through my social media feeds, I see people who hold different viewpoints than I do. And I feel bad about blocking them, but now I want to because it's overwhelming and it feels bad. And so we talked about how these things that we're engaging with now are going to bring up a lot of discomfort inside of us. And they should. But the advice I gave her was not the advice that I would give her now, a couple of hours later. Because I said that it's really important to do your self-care. And if you need to block people so that you can be in this calm, connected state, then that may be the choice that you need to make. And then I sat with that. And I thought to myself, well, maybe this is the entire underlying problem. Is that primarily as Caucasian people in developed countries, we have gotten to a place where comfort, surrounding ourselves with comfort, beautiful things in our home, beautiful clothing, being in the nicest neighborhoods, having the best schools. I mean, doesn't everybody want that standard of life, right? But when that standard of life, that ability to be comfortable, that ability to disconnect from the darker things that are happening in our world, are willing to go into spiritual communities and meditate and do all these beautiful things and do gong baths and all the stuff that I've done. But at what cost to someone else? And this is not an idea that makes me comfortable. Although I live in a small one-bedroom apartment, it is in one of the most expensive areas in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. and I have nice things, and I have a business, and I have pets, and I have a garden, and I have so much. I have so much. And sometimes I find myself longing for more, right? Longing for more things or more money or more this or more that. And there are people, and I spoke about this on a reading I posted yesterday, where there was a man on the side of the road, and he was just so grateful for the only dollar in cash that I had in my wallet that I gave him. And we begin to realize that our comfort level, our lifestyle that doesn't, where we don't have to look at any of this stuff anymore. It would be okay if we were extending that to everyone. If we were like, you know what, we're committed to this level of life and this level of comfort and this level of moving out of survival mode and being able to go to personal and spiritual growth classes. And that is actually the world that I want. That is the vision I have, is that every human being will be able to move out of survival mode. But what we don't realize about that is it's a nice thought, but what it requires is a little bit of sacrifice on our part. Because we do live in a world with finite resources. And therefore, the more I have, the less someone else has. The more land I have, the less that's available for someone else. It's just kind of how it goes, right? The more water I take, the more gold that I have, the more of anything that I have, the less there is for someone else. And this idea, especially in westernized United States culture, that we need to have more. More is better, more makes you happier, more makes you more valuable as a human being, more gives you power. This idea has been the most detrimental thing that has ever happened to this planet. And we've been on this track for thousands of years now. And here we are standing at that crossroads, and we're like, okay, do we continue on with power, control, hoarding resources? Or do we move in a new direction? Because what I'll ask everyone out there, especially my Caucasian friends, is what is it that you're willing to sacrifice in your life in order for this to happen? Like, we have this ideal, right, in the spiritual community that we want this kind of world, but where does that magically happen? Like, what is it you're willing to give up in order for the earth to be healthy, in order for people of color to have equal opportunity, in order for all schools to be, equally nourishing and educating our children? What are you willing to give up? Where are you willing to be uncomfortable in your life? Because this idea that, well, I don't want to look at that, and that really bothers me, and I don't want to see that someone might have racist ideas, and I don't want to look at, something that might disturb me. I think this has gone around in the spiritual community, and particularly with empaths, like, well, I don't want to look at that. I need to protect my energy field. I need to be in this high vibration, right? And I have bought into that just as easily as everyone else. Don't get me wrong, I like being in a high vibration. And when I'm in a higher vibration, I actually can make better decisions. But I realize that there is absolutely nothing wrong with being uncomfortable, with being enraged about the system and the way that our world is going. There's nothing wrong with saying no fucking more. No more deaths. Like George Floyd. There's nothing wrong with putting a video like this out there, putting my own reputation on the line, my own business on the line, and saying, you know what, if people don't like it, then it's okay, because they don't have to follow me. Because we need to be able to put ourselves on the line. And it's not because we need to be able to put ourselves on the line, it's because people of color need us to put ourselves on the line. I sat this morning and I watched a woman, a Black woman, who posted on her personal Facebook page about how coaches and spiritual leaders were responding to what's happening right now. How they were shutting down conversations inside their communities and not letting those voices be heard, not letting people express their rage and their pain and their fear, not allowing it to be uncomfortable because we don't want to be uncomfortable. It reminds me of a time when I was the manager of a community center in a primarily African-American neighborhood. And the assistant manager was Hispanic and Latina. And she and I sat down to have a meeting together, and somehow we got into this discussion about whether people can pull themselves up out of poverty. And myself at the time said, well, you know, I pulled myself up out of poverty. I paid for myself to go to college. It took me 10 years to get through school. You know, why can someone else who wasn't born into poverty, why can't they do that as well? So I had this mentality of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which is what people of color have heard the whole time, right? They've heard this the whole time. And it occurs to me now as I look back at that conversation, how entrenched I was in that narrative, right? How entrenched I was in that narrative that if I could do it, anyone can do it. Well, I had hard times. Why can't someone else? My family was poor. You know, how come other people from other poor families can't make it? And that was my blindness, right? That was my blindness to racism. And she just walked out of the meeting because she just couldn't explain it to me. I wasn't in a place to understand or to hear it. I wasn't in a place to hear that kind of statement and reflect on how I had embodied that until the death of George Floyd about 2 weeks ago. It's how long it took. It took almost 15, 20 years for me to understand that the playing field is not equal, to accept that, and to recognize that because I was brought up in that, I embodied and even exacerbated some of those issues with my staff, with the kids that I served. Don't get me wrong, I did good things there. And I learned a lot, and I listened to the community, and it shifted a lot of different attitudes and assumptions and prejudices that I had. But I still had more, right? I still had more. And so when we become afraid of looking at ourselves, you know, it's one thing to go out there and say, well, that person is overtly racist, right? I mean, it's one thing to look at our president and say that person is overtly racist. Look at them. They're inciting violence. They're talking, you know, they're caging people at the border. You know, he's doing these things, right? Our president, Donald Trump, is doing these things. It's another thing to recognize all the nuances and subtleties of systemic racism and how we play a role in that. A couple of years ago, I was on my way to get my hair cut with one of my good friends, and I was pulled over by the police. I was speeding. I was doing about 15 miles over the speed limit. And I pulled over, and he came up to the side of my car, and he was like very guarded, and it just really freaked me out. I was like, wow, I've never had that happen before. But he needed to do that because you never know as a police officer what's going to come out of the car, what someone's going to have. I mean, it's an incredibly stressful and dangerous job that they do. And then as he came up to the car, and he saw that it was me, his whole demeanor changed. I watched his whole energy field change. He relaxed, took his hand off his gun. It's like, oh, it's just a white woman. And I handed him my stuff. He was very polite to me. Said, ma'am, you were speeding. I said, oh, I'm sorry, I just got off the highway. I didn't know that I didn't see a sign. Or he says, okay, I'm gonna go run this. And so he comes back and he said, well, you know, I'm just gonna give you a warning. And that's what he did. Gave me a piece of paper with warning. I wasn't pulled out of my car. I wasn't ticketed. I wasn't handcuffed. So I go on my way and I get to the hair appointment and I tell my friend, who's Latina, about this. And I said, I had this realization that if I had been any other color, that wouldn't have gone the same way. And she said, yeah, if it was me in the car, it wouldn't have gone the same way. And so we have these moments in our life, these opportunities, when we can make exponential growth. And the question I ask you is, are you taking this as that opportunity? I will say I have never, ever read a book about slavery, about racism. I've read very few books even that were written by an African American or a person who is not Caucasian. Just being completely honest about it. And now's a new day. It's time for me to hear other voices. It's time for me to stop worrying about being uncomfortable and start worrying about making sure that every human life is valued and that Black lives matter. And I'm not going to do this right, probably, and I'm not going to do this perfectly, but I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to be respectful, and I'm going to listen more than I talk. Because this is huge. We talk about, we want there to be an evolution of consciousness on this planet. What the hell are we talking about? I mean, this is what is being called right here to evolve. It's not sunshines and rainbows. I like rainbows, but it's not that. This is about the hardcore nitty gritty in the streets, down and dirty shit that actually happens every single day in this country to people who are oppressed, who don't receive opportunities because of the color of their skin, because of their gender, their sexual orientation, their immigrant status, and all other myriad of reasons. One of the things that I did say this morning on the course that I felt like was right was that I believe that learning how not to judge others for their way of being is our greatest opportunity and our biggest challenge as human beings. I think that is spot on. And my friends, it starts here. It starts here. Where are we judging? Who are we judging? What are those things, those phrases and things that we think are innocent? Or why should someone get offended? Or just because a Black person has never said, you know what, that's really offensive. But inside they were just so pissed or so hurt or so wounded again by something that we just threw off the cuff. So when we say, I feel uncomfortable, they're like, so I feel afraid when I go out every day that I won't come home to my kids. Those are two different things, right? And I don't know about you, but I'm willing to be uncomfortable in order to shift and change that for others. That's really what leadership is about. And it's going to create a necessity to go within and to be honest, and to talk about the places where we didn't do that well, and to learn how we can do it better, and to keep trying to improve it. I'll just leave you with this. Where is it in your life that you can lend your voice, that you can lend your vote, that you can lend your money to changing the system? Who is it that you can call? What cause can you join? Because it's all interwoven. Whether what you really care about is our planet, or what you really care about is patriarchy, or what you really care about is as the right to do arts and arts culture, whether you care about any of these things, it's all interwoven. If we do not have basic human rights, these other things are not going to happen, right? How are we going to treat the earth as our mother, as an ecosystem that we love and we nurture, if we don't even treat each other that way? What good is it that we can paint or do art if people can't even eat, right? So I'm not suggesting, because I don't like this idea of self-shaming, right? I don't think that's helpful, but it is self-owning. It is self-owning. It's like me saying that because I worked in landscaping for 10 years with primarily Hispanic males, and I learned a little bit of broken Spanish. And one time they shared with me their lunch, and it was like this kind of a fried cactus. See, I can't even remember the name of it. How about that? But somehow I would think I was like culturally educated about Hispanic culture, right? I didn't know anything about their lives, what they really dealt with, where they came from. I knew snippets, right? I knew snippets, but these are our coworkers. This is the person in the grocery store who walks by you. These are other human beings. And every person has a life story, and every person has struggles and challenges, and every person has hopes and dreams and visions and wants the same thing as you and I. But it's going to require a little bit of sacrifice. And it's going to require a little bit of humility and a little bit of self-education and a whole lot of speaking out and taking action on the things that matter. And now's the time. We're presented with the greatest opportunity. And it's not going to be comfortable. And it's not going to be safe. And it may not always be high vibrational either. And that's okay. And do we still need to do our self-care? Absolutely. But there's a difference between doing your self-care and running away from the problem. Not being willing to look at it because it makes you feel bad. We need to feel bad. Because the history is horrific. So generally I come with some really wonderful, hopeful message, and I wish I had that. As a matter of fact, I do have that. I do hold that vision. I do hold that vision of a better place, a better life, safety, respect. We have a long way to go, and we need to start now. And to me, that's the best message ever. It's the best message ever. It's like if we start right now, if each of us does, as much as we can to be in support of our brothers and sisters on this planet. If each of us quits worrying so much about our reputation and how's this going to look and what might I lose, and we start saying, how do we make everyone win? It's possible. We're here to lay the foundations for that, just as others laid foundations for it before us and before that and before that. I thank you for tuning in and connecting. I'll continue to talk about this in different ways and different places, and my own learning and my own reflecting on my own journey with this and how I'm trying to do things differently. Yeah. And so for anyone out there who I brought that mentality of you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, I'm sorry. And for any of the Hispanic workers I worked with, that I did not treat you completely as an equal or as a person that I wanted to get to know and to respect, I'm sorry. In any way that I've hurt anyone because of my ignorance, my lack of consciousness, I'm sorry. And I resolve to do better. And I resolve to speak up and to keep exploring and to keep inviting others who connect with me to explore how we can make this work together. Namaste.